Gregor Elementary. A place that should have been a sanctuary of learning and joy, a haven for young minds to grow and flourish. For most children it was just that, a place filled with laughter, friendships, and the excitement of discovery. A place of laughter for most, not for Eddie Huntington. For Eddie, Gregor Elementary was a daily ordeal, a battleground where he faced relentless torment. While other kids played and laughed, Eddie lived in a constant state of fear. He knew its corridors as a maze of fear. Each hallway, each classroom was a potential trap. The shadows seemed to whisper his name, reminding him that he was never truly safe. The flickering lights only added to the eerie atmosphere, making the school feel more like a haunted house than a place of learning. Mickey Lane, the undisputed king of cruelty, ruled with an iron fist. His reign of terror was absolute, and his word was law. Mickey's presence was enough to send shivers down the spines of even the bravest kids. He was a master of intimidation, and he enjoyed every moment of it. His lieutenants, Frank Muller and Isaac Parker, were always eager to please. They followed Mickey's orders without question, relishing the power that came from being part of his inner circle. Together they formed a trio that was feared by all. They were a pack of wolves, and Eddie was their prey. They tormented him relentlessly. Bugs in his lunchbox. It was one of their favorite tricks. Eddie would open his lunchbox, hoping for a moment of peace, only to find it crawling with insects. The sight of those bugs would make his stomach churn, and the laughter of his tormentors would echo in his ears. Mud balls hurled at his back. They would wait for him in the schoolyard, hiding behind corners, ready to strike. The first splat of mud would hit him, and then another, and another. By the time they were done, Eddie would be covered in filth, his clothes ruined, his spirit crushed. Every day held a new nightmare. Eddie never knew what to expect. Would it be a cruel prank, a physical assault, or another round of humiliating taunts? The uncertainty was almost as bad as the bullying itself. It kept him on edge, always looking over his shoulder, always waiting for the next attack. Eddie was a quiet boy, small for his age. He preferred to stay in the background, hoping to go unnoticed. But his quiet demeanor and small stature made him an easy target. He was different, and in the cruel world of childhood, different often means vulnerable. He was an easy target. The bullies saw him as weak, and they exploited that weakness at every opportunity. They pushed him, shoved him, and called him names. They made sure he knew that he was alone, that no one would come to his aid. Their laughter echoed in his ears, a constant reminder of his misery. It was a cruel, mocking sound that followed him everywhere. Even in his dreams he couldn't escape it. The laughter was a symbol of his torment, a reminder that he was trapped in a world of pain and fear. Lunchtime was the worst. The cafeteria, a cacophony of noise and smells, became a torture chamber for Eddie. One day Mickey, his face twisted in a cruel smirk, slammed Eddie's tray onto the floor. Milk splattered everywhere. Laughter erupted around them. "Oops," Mickey sneered, his eyes cold and menacing. "Looks like you're eating dirt today, Huntington." Frank and Isaac, their faces contorted in delight, joined the chorus of laughter. Eddie, his face burning with shame, could only stare at the mess on the floor. The old bridge, shrouded in mist and shadows, was a forbidding place. It stood as a silent sentinel, a relic of a bygone era, its steel frame rusting and its paint peeling. The locals whispered tales of its haunted past, of the souls who had met their end there, never to return. The bridge was more than just a structure, it was a symbol of fear and mystery, a place where the line between the living and the dead seemed to blur. It was there, on that fateful afternoon, that their cruelty reached its peak. The group of kids, driven by a mix of boredom and malice, had chosen Eddie as their target. Eddie, with his quiet demeanor and small stature, was an easy mark for their taunts and jeers. The fog that enveloped the bridge seemed to amplify their voices, turning their cruel words into ghostly echoes that reverberated through the air. Taunting Eddie with insults, they chased him onto the bridge. "Run, Eddie, run!" they shouted, their laughter ringing out like a sinister chorus. Eddie's heart pounded in his chest as he sprinted across the weathered planks, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He could feel the weight of their hatred bearing down on him, pushing him to run faster, to escape their relentless pursuit. Eddie, his heart pounding in his chest, ran as fast as he could. The mist swirled around him, obscuring his vision and making the bridge seem like an endless expanse. His footsteps echoed hollowly on the wooden planks, each step a desperate attempt to put distance between himself and his tormentors. He could hear their footsteps behind him, growing louder and more insistent with each passing second. Rocks flew through the air, each one a missile aimed at his small frame. The first rock whizzed past his ear, missing him by mere inches. The second struck his shoulder, sending a jolt of pain through his body. He stumbled but kept running, driven by sheer terror. The barrage of rocks continued, each one a reminder of the cruelty that pursued him. One by one they found their mark. Each impact was a blow to his spirit, a reminder of his helplessness. Eddie's vision blurred with tears, but he refused to stop. He knew that if he stopped, if he gave in, the consequences would be far worse than the pain he was enduring. Eddie stumbled, his foot catching on a loose plank. He fell to his knees, the rough wood scraping his skin. For a moment he lay there, gasping for breath, his body trembling with exhaustion and fear. But the sound of approaching footsteps spurred him to his feet. He couldn't afford to stay down, he had to keep moving. He tumbled over the edge, his screams swallowed by the mist. The world seemed to slow down as he fell, the bridge receding into the distance above him. His mind raced with thoughts of his family, his friends, and the life he was leaving behind. The mist enveloped him, a cold, clammy shroud that seemed to pull him down into its depths. Below, jagged rocks awaited his broken body. The sharp edges glistened in the dim light, a cruel reminder of the fate that awaited him. As he plummeted towards them, a sense of resignation washed over him. He closed his eyes, bracing for the inevitable impact, his final thoughts a silent plea for mercy. The days that followed were filled with a silence more deafening than any laughter. Mickey, Frank, and Isaac were bound by a dark secret. They told no one of their crime, but the guilt was a heavy weight, a shadow that followed them everywhere. Then, the whispers began. At first they were faint, barely audible. Mickey would hear his name called in the dead of night, his voice a chilling whisper. He brushed it aside, attributing it to his overactive imagination. But the whispers persisted, growing louder, more insistent with each passing day. One night, Mickey awoke to an icy chill in his room. His heart pounded in his chest. He could feel something watching him. He turned towards the window. The curtains billowed inwards, as if pushed by an unseen hand. And then he saw it. Standing in the shadows, its eyes glowing with an eerie red light, was a contorted creature. Its face, if it could be called a face, was a grotesque mockery of Eddie Huntington's. Its mouth was twisted into a silent scream, revealing rows of sharp, pointed teeth. Section 6. The Feast. This is a tale of horror, a nightmarish journey into the unknown, where the line between reality and nightmare blurs. Frank woke from a nightmare, his body drenched in a cold sweat. His heart pounded in his chest, each beat echoing the terror he had just experienced. The room was dark. The shadows seemed to dance on the walls, mocking his fear. He felt a weight on his chest, suffocating him. It was as if an invisible force was pressing down on him, making it hard to breathe. His mind raced, trying to make sense of the overwhelming dread that consumed him. He tried to scream, but no sound escaped his lips. He opened his eyes, hoping to find solace in the familiar surroundings of his bedroom, but what he saw only deepened his horror. Hovering above him, its putrid breath washing over his face, was Eddie. Eddie, his childhood friend, who had died years ago in a tragic accident. But this was not the Eddie he remembered. But it was Eddie like he had never seen him before. His face was a grotesque mask of decay, his once vibrant features now twisted and rotten. The stench of death clung to him, making Frank gag. His skin was green and decaying, his eyes milky white and lifeless. They stared at Frank with an intensity that seemed to pierce his very soul. The sight was both heartbreaking and terrifying. Worms crawled in and out of the gaping hole where his mouth should have been. They wriggled and squirmed, a grotesque display of the macabre. Frank's stomach churned at the sight. Eddie opened his mouth and a torrent of worms and maggots spewed out, covering Frank's face. The slimy creatures crawled over his skin, their cold bodies sending shivers down his spine. Frank screamed, a primal scream of terror and disgust. His voice echoed through the room, a desperate plea for help that went unanswered. The nightmare was far from over, and Frank knew that this was just the beginning of his torment. Section 7. Crawling Terror. Isaac sat on the toilet, his stomach churning with fear. He hadn't slept in days. The guilt was eating him alive. He kept seeing Eddie's face everywhere he looked. As he reached for the toilet paper, he felt something brush against his hand. He recoiled in horror. There on the floor was Eddie. His body was twisted at an unnatural angle, his limbs broken and contorted. His eyes, wide with accusation, stared directly at Isaac. Eddie began to crawl towards him, his broken bones scraping against the tile floor. Section 8. The Price of Guilt. Mickey, driven mad by the relentless haunting, drank bleach. He died in agony, his screams echoing through the empty house. Frank, unable to escape the image of Eddie's decaying face, jumped off the same bridge where Eddie met his demise. Isaac, the last of the trio, locked himself in his room. He set fire to his house, the flames consuming him along with his guilt. Their deaths were gruesome, a fitting end to their reign of terror. Section 9. Eternal Silence. The haunting of Gregor Elementary ceased. The whispers faded into silence. Eddie was finally at peace. But the memory of their cruelty lingered, a cautionary tale whispered among the students. Mickey, Frank, and Isaac became nothing more than ghosts themselves, forever bound to the scene of their crime. The old bridge still stands, shrouded in mist and shadows. Some say that on a quiet night, if you listen closely, you can still hear their screams. The screams of the guilty forever tormented by the consequences of their actions. Thanks for stopping by and watching this gruesome and unsettling tale from Father Lokk and Father Lokk's Horror House. Welcome to the family, all new subscribers. It's such an honor to call you a Lokk. Please subscribe and hit your notification bell if you haven't already. Be safe out there. And in the words of Father Lokk, always remember and always know that he love y'all. Bye, family.